Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the SAM Resident Medical Student Webinar, the Inside Scoop on Academic Jobs. For those of you joining us for the first time, the core purpose of RAMS is to advance the future of emergency medicine through the development of resident and medical students into academic leaders. We do this through knowledge creation, translation, and dissemination, and we hope that this particular webinar will bring you the information that you need to know now. Tonight, we'll be joined by academic emergency medicine department chairs from around the country who will speak to us about how they're hiring in this current climate. We'll review how academic departments are adapting to the new economics of emergency medicine during COVID-19 and what they look for in new academic emergency medicine physicians. And then most importantly, we'll save plenty of time after our panel discussion to answer any lingering questions you might still have. During the presentation, you may submit questions for the presenters by clicking the chat button in your Zoom menu interface. And then questions will be answered live during our session. But really, the majority of them, we will wait till the end and go through those with the remainder of our time. To kick things off, I'd like to introduce our panelists for tonight, starting off with Dr. Chadwick Miller. He's the Chair of Emergency Medicine at Wake Forest School of Medicine and Executive Director of Emergency Services at Wake Forest Baptist Health. Dr. Ian Martin is the System Chairman of the Department of Emergency Medicine at the Medical College of Wisconsin School of Medicine. At the medical school, he holds appointments as professor with tenure of emergency medicine and internal medicine. Dr. Martin is also emergency physician-in-chief of the Froedtert and Medical College of Wisconsin Health System. And Dr. Martin is also the immediate past president of the Society of Academic Emergency Medicine. We also have Dr. Angela Mills. She is the J.E. Beaumont Professor and founding chair of the Department of Emergency Medicine at Columbia University, Vagelos College of Physicians and Surgeons, as well as the Chief of Emergency Services for New York Presbyterian Columbia. She's the current Secretary Treasurer of the Society for Academic Emergency Medicine as well. And then Dr. Peter Sokolov is a professor and chair in the Department of Emergency Medicine at the University of California, San Francisco School of Medicine. He's also the current president of the Association of Academic Chairs of Emergency Medicine. And then Dr. David Wright is professor and the chair of Department of Emergency Medicine at Emory University School of Medicine. He holds adjunct appointments in the Department of Biomedical Engineering at the Georgia Institute of Technology, Rollins School of Public Health, and the Nell Hodgson Woodruff School of Nursing. We would also like to recognize and thank Dr. Nihal Naik, the immediate past president of RAMS and the current resident member of the SAM Board of Directors, who developed the majority of the concept and content for this evening, but was unable to moderate due to work conflicts. Thank you all so much for being with us. And now to our speakers. We're really happy to have you joining with us tonight to share your expertise and insights for those that are looking forward to or currently looking into finding a position in academic emergency medicine. We'll jump right into the questions with our first question for Dr. Miller. In general, Dr. Miller, in this day and age, how are you advising someone when they come to you to talk about academic jobs?
Well, thank you, Dr. Starnes. You know, this is an unusual year because of all the things that have happened with COVID. And I think we probably need to break this out into general strategies and ones that would be more pertinent to this particular year in general. This year, the job market is intensely competitive, and there's a relatively small number of academic jobs available, which also mirrors the non-academic jobs across the country as well. And I think my general advice is to think about what unique skill set an individual might have. And do they have that existing skill set, or is there a skill set that they need to develop? And I think the trend over the past decade or so has been for academic jobs or academic positions really looking to fill a particular void in an academic program. And so from an applicant standpoint, really doing an inventory of what is it the skill set that you have or you desire to develop, and how are you going to get there, and then put yourself forward as having that skill set. Many programs are pretty chock full of people who are interested in education. And so taking that example there, how is it that you might take your interest in education and turn that into how you might want to create scholarship and how you're going to publish about that education would just be one example. And if you don't have that skill set, considering whether a fellowship might be right for you to further advance that skill set. Very similar in the research space, taking that interest into the skill set development component and developing that expertise, and then putting yourself forward as having that skill set or being interested in developing it. But in general, because of the paucity of jobs, I think a key here is if you find yourself needing to develop that skill set, what an opportune time now to be thinking about additional training over the upcoming year, perhaps in a fellowship. So that's a bit of a response to that, Andrew. I think we'll probably get more into that as the evening goes on.
Yeah, I appreciate the broad view and then the specifics of really burrowing down and figuring out what your niche is going to be and how to be productive. I'd open it up to the other panelists and say, kind of, what are the first things that you tell your residents or those that are applying that come to you right now and say, I want to go into academics. How should I go about looking for a job? Dr. Sokola, let's go to you. What do you say when someone comes up and asks you for advice on this?
First of all, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you and the great panelists, and thanks to everybody for joining the webinar. The first thing I tell people when they're, first of all, looking at academic jobs is congratulations, because I think it's a great decision. Emergency medicine, as you all know, is a phenomenal field, and academic emergency medicine can be a tremendously fulfilling long-term career where you can explore so many different passions, whether it's from education or research or other types of scholarship, clinical leadership, and there's just global health. It's an endless list of possibilities that you can do. And what's great about academic careers is it allows you to really have a very well balanced career with different activities besides your general clinical work that we all do as emergency physicians. And it also gives you an opportunity to have those things evolve over your career, because when the way you start with your academic position, it may change what happens in 5 years or in 10 years or in 20 years, and your career may evolve. So first thing I say is I think it's great that people are interested in going into academic emergency medicine. I think it's a great opportunity. As was mentioned earlier, it's a little bit of a different year this year than most years as far as the job market. Everybody's pretty aware there have been, because of COVID, some really significant financial pressures on academic institutions, on academic health systems, and academic departments of emergency medicine. Basically places closed down largely for surgical volumes, for their emergency department volumes, the patient care that they were giving, that of course provides the revenue to sustain these programs, was really dramatically reduced. So a lot of these systems are under tremendous pressure, and some have better financial reserves, kind of money in the bank, than others do. So it's been really challenging on health systems, and it's been challenging on academic departments. And so I think none of us has a crystal ball of exactly what's going to happen with volumes, what's exactly going to happen with revenue, and what's going to happen with staffing needs. So I think kind of the word I use is that I think most chairs are probably just being cautious right now when they're thinking about hiring. They're being very careful and cautious to make sure that they really do have the volume and the revenue that'll support the hires they want to make, which is really important. So there's been a lot of financial pressure at our particular institution, and it's not this way for every institution. At our particular institution, we instituted, because of the financial challenges, a hiring freeze across all of our departments for the academic year that we're in right now, for July through the next July coming up, so through June 30th of 2021. And we're taking a wait and see approach. Let's see what happens with our volumes and our staffing needs to see whether we're going to be able to recruit more faculty starting in the next academic year. So for us personally right now, while we are still getting inquiries and certainly looking at CVs and accepting them, we don't have a formal opening and a search right now for faculty. There are other programs that definitely have openings and they're looking for people right now. So let me just mention one resource for you, and then I want to turn it back to other panelists, so I'm not talking too much here. AACEM, which is the Association of Academic Chairs in Emergency Medicine, realized that this is a challenge that many of our program directors and trainees are facing right now as they're going into looking for academic jobs, and they're not sure about who's hiring now and who's not hiring right now. So we did a little bit of an internal survey within the department chairs and asked department chairs to kind of list, are they having openings and how many do they think they're going to have, and put together a little resource. And what we've done as academic chairs is we have shared that with all of your program directors. So your program directors, if you go talk with them, should have a list of at least programs that wanted to be on the list and report that they have open positions available or that don't have positions available. And while the list itself won't be probably circulating around, it absolutely can be used for guidance for you as trainees and for others who are looking for academic jobs to know who is looking right now and where you can be looking. And I can tell you, when we look at that list, there's probably getting close to up to maybe a couple hundred academic faculty positions around the country. And there may be more as well. So there still are positions out there. There are places to look. It's just a tighter market, and not all places are looking as much as they were before. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Dr. Sokolow. So let's say, Dr. Wright, we'll go to you next and say we've kind of touched on a couple of different things, but do you have a sense yet of what you think it's going to be like in the short term as far as hiring trends and changes versus the long term for your institution?
Yeah, similar to Peter, we are under a hiring freeze in the short term, so really the only opportunities we have in the areas where, and you've heard it already said, and I think there's actually a particular question that's specific to this, is the opportunities we have are through fellowships. So we have been allowed to hire into our fellowships, which are essentially faculty positions, junior faculty positions. And these are the non-ACGME fellowships, like research, global health, some of these, or some of the other non-ACGME fellowships. So those positions we've been allowed to hire into to continue our fellowship, which is, in part lifeblood of part of our program. And so those I would look to. So you have to sort of consider, is this a time, to get, as Chad said, to get additional training? Is this something that you've wanted to do? Now's the time to do it, because I think a lot of programs, even the academic programs that are under a hiring freeze, if they have fellowships that they had open, because these are considered replacement positions, that we can hire into those fellowships. So that would be one thing. And that's the one thing that we're, even for our own residents, we have an enormous number, largest class of our own residents applying to our own program that we've ever had. So, we're encouraging them, if you want a position with us, you're probably going to have to look at a fellowship. So that's one in the short term. I think there's other opportunities that are the silver lining, if there is such a thing, to COVID, is we've expanded our telehealth market, and we're working in developing telehealth across a whole spectrum, and that's another area where we're considering we may actually be able to open positions up simply because we've been able to broaden that and add additional positions to cover the telehealth market. But The bottom line is, I think most programs, and someone correct me if theirs is different, most programs volume is down about 20%. And what we're seeing and what we think is that won't necessarily bounce back quickly, and that a lot of that is probably being taken over, that 20%, by the expansion of telehealth from our clinics, who are now taking away some of that lower acuity type of patients that we've typically seen. So that's why we're expanding our telehealth reach, is because we believe that's probably something here to stay as long as CMS continues to make permanent the billing practices that they've allowed during COVID.
Thank you. On that note, knowing that a lot of the hiring decisions come down to the economics of running the department, Dr. Martin, let's go to you and just, could you explain specifically, because it's really not always simple, the finances for running an academic emergency medicine department. How does the drop in department volumes really affect how the department is able to hire and expand and grow?
Well, thank you for the question, Andrew, and thank you to you and EHAL for coordinating this important session tonight. And thank you to the other panelists. So I will say that while our institution, like many others around the country, quickly pivoted from crisis management around the health crisis of COVID, a month in, 6 weeks in, we were faced, like many other places, with the economic crisis that COVID, or actually shutting down normal operations, induced. And for much of the last 6 months and coming into the summer, it was touch and go, and we were having to be very creative and dynamic in terms of how we used our physicians and our APPs, sometimes scaling, much of it scaled down. And so effectively furloughing some of those folks, though we were still paying them at that point, so not furloughed in the most technical sense. And trying to make our best guess about what was going to happen in July 1. Fortunately, we've recovered to about within 10% of our usual volumes. So we're quite fortunate in that regard. But I don't anticipate that other 10% will come back anytime soon, if at all. And maybe 10% contracted is actually where we should be. You could argue that some of the patients, lower acuity patients that we see in any of our emergency departments, could be better served in a lower cost environment. So I say all that to say that, while we certainly had our challenges in academic medicine, I look at what's happened in a number of community-based private practices in my region and others. And I think many of them have had an even more difficult time weathering this storm, where they purely live in a eat what you kill sort of environment, and they've contracted much more than we have. I think by way of being a part of a larger academic institution and health system, there is a relative amount of security that we were able to provide in this academic environment that many of our competitors in the private sector were not able to do so. So my story is a little bit different than some of the other colleagues in that we are hiring and growing. Most of the other clinical departments in our practice are also in a hiring freeze. Emergency medicine is actually doing some strategic expansion across the region. And so we have the good fortune of being able to continue to hire really good talent, and the numbers have just been tremendous. And I suspect some folks think we're great, but I think many of it, or much of it, it's a funnel effect, that the word is out about which particular places are hiring at this point. And one of the points I would just go back, and I'll stop here. And I think, Andrew, maybe you said this, talking about many of the folks who come to look for academic jobs are interested in doing it because they like teaching. And I think at this time, it's really critically important to somehow differentiate yourself. Almost by definition, every faculty member who is in any of our departments loves teaching. And I often tell my own residents, in trying to distinguish themselves, the real question is, what is it that you want to teach? Teaching is sort of the tool, but what do you want to be the expert at? Is it epidemiology? Is it global health, or any number of other things as well? So I'll just stop there.
Oh, that's really helpful. Thank you, Dr. Martin. You mentioned kind of being in some ways an ideal situation as an employer now, where you have a lot of qualified applicants for each spot. And Dr. Mills, we'll go to you with this next one, because I know that this is something that you're saying now that you have so really multiple qualified applicants for the positions that you have. What should applicants expect as far as is knowing that competition is harder this year? Is that going to change the offers that they get? Are they going to be able to negotiate as much for buy down time or for competitive salaries? How has that come up as you have been navigating the hiring this season?
Oh, thanks again for having me. I think, as you've heard, obviously we're in a difficult market this year. There's certainly a number of places that are hiring, other places that may be on freeze, hiring freezes. But I want to just stress to the applicants that emergency medicine, even on normal years, is a very fluid practice, in the sense that I might not be hiring today, and then tomorrow somebody tells me they're retiring, or maybe someone is leaving or getting a position on the hospital side or something like that. So the other thing I think is going on this year is that a lot of hospitals and health systems may be on hiring freezes, but their freeze might be, say, through December 30th, and then they decide, or it might be in the spring or something. So that being said, I just want applicants to think about, just because you don't see something right now doesn't mean you shouldn't apply, doesn't mean you shouldn't express interest. I think that's really critical, because obviously, for the different groups, I've seen a lot of places interview applicants and say, well, we're not hiring right now. We're going to reassess at the end of December. And so we might be. And so I think that our time frame this year might be a little bit different. So I think that's really important to think about as well. I think as far as offers, number one, I would say it depends on what type of job is being offered. So at our department, we are certainly hiring. Many of the jobs might be earmarked, meaning we're hiring for a medical director right now, or we're hiring for a simulation fellowship trained faculty, right? Again, it's important to find out somebody might be hiring, what are they looking for, and does that match your skill set? I think for the applicants, as some said, sort of thinking about what distinguishes you, where you can stand out, thinking about what you would be willing to do, or what type of job you'd be willing to take. Would you be willing to work all nights? Would you be willing to work weekends? Because maybe there's a spot open in a site, a main site, or maybe a community site, and that might be a benefit. It might not be advertised as a nocturnist job, but maybe the group is interested in nocturnists. So I think, again, thinking about what aspects you have, what you are interested in, and sort of determine your thoughts about the job. At our place, we have a transparent salary scale. So as far as salaries and things, it's not transparent. I mean, it's transparent. It's not negotiable in that sense. Obviously, for new grads, and it's all transparent in that way. I think that across the country, there may be places who may have decreased salaries or cut salaries, or maybe changed a little bit of structure with maybe a bonus, or, I think every academic place and every hospital is going to have a different compensation style. But it's, I certainly would say, as applicants, you need to ask and find out what an offer looks like. And so I think there's absolutely space for negotiating. And again, just trying to figure out what your skills are, what you're offering, and what the need is of the department.
Andrew, if you don't mind me adding on top of that, a couple of things that Angela said that I think are important if they're already discussing salary and compensation with you, you're a wanted commodity. So you can definitely inquire at that point in time. I would also put an exclamation on, go ahead and apply, because we don't know what's going to happen. I'm not the one that put the freeze on. It was the president of the university It could be tomorrow they lift the freeze because our revenues are back up in September and we're looking a lot better. We've learned how to toggle our surgeries and things that bring income into the program without just shutting it down like we did in March and February where we took the big hit. So we're doing a lot better, and I'm sure many of the institutions are doing a lot better now that they've learned how to moderate and count their ICU beds and figure out how to do the surgeries and that generate the revenue for their program. And certainly some are going to be stronger than others, but for our program, we're accepting applications and we're putting them on a list. We may not interview you, but we certainly have them, and we're looking through those to see who are the bright stars that we might want to bring into our program should things be lifted. I would be a little careful about just be completely honest. Don't do a bait and switch. If you tell a program that I'll work all nights, make sure that you'll work all nights. That happened to us one time, and that was an unpleasant, unfortunate incident where someone decided that they weren't going to do what they said they were going to do once they got here. So that's you don't want to do that. That's for sure. That's not a long-term play for your career. And when you join academia, and again, this is a point that Peter made that was so eloquent, which is, this is the lifeblood of emergency medicine is academia. It's the foundation for what we do as a specialty. And it's absolutely critically important that the brightest and the best are joining the academic ranks. And so we want you out there. We want you being scholarly. We want you being productive. And so it's really important. If this is something that you want to do, think about it. And then the last point I'm going to make, and then I'll shut up, Andrew, is consider flexibility. I think Angela mentioned it before, but consider that the timing may not be interview fall, start in June, right? This may be really totally off. You may be, well, I've always wanted to take that European trip. And I'm going to do it June, July, August, and September, and then I'll start in December of 2022, or well, fiscal year 22, but December of 21. That might give programs more ability to bring people on if you're pushing your start date later. So consider that potential flexibility when you're discussing your opportunities.
Gosh, that's all terrific feedback. So let's say the applicant, they feel like they have a good fit, they're flexible, they have their niche, and they do sit down in this sort of environment to talk about the financial side of the job. Dr. Miller, what do you think it's important for us as applicants to know going into that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Just on the financial side, one is that academics tends to be a fairly fixed overhead, in that we, as Ian was talking about, some of the community sites being able to scale back coverage. We in academics don't really have as much flexibility to do that. And so we do end up with things such as hiring freezes and such, although fortunately we've not entered into that arrangement here at Wake. But I do think it's important as an applicant that you understand the rules of the game that you're going to be paid by. And every academic institution is going to be different, and there's no one right answer to it, but you have to understand it. It needs to be transparent. I think nearly all are going to have a relatively transparent base salary structure. You'll need to know, you'd want to know that. You'd want to know how you might get some sort of variable compensation, and what your expectations are to achieve that variable compensation. And I think as either David or Peter said, that if you're having that compensation discussion, you've made it a long ways, because now you're talking about the terms of an offer. And I wouldn't expect you necessarily to get worse terms because the market is challenging. I expect your terms to look representative of other people in other years. Really, the question just is there a spot, and are you the right fit from a skill set for what that program is looking for.
Perfect. So I think every applicant always, they think about what's the job going to be like, what's the pay going to be like, but also we know one of the big predictors of interest or something that sometimes folks need to be flexible on is geography and where the job is at. So we have a really great representative group from all over the country. If we could just take a second, go through everybody and say, do you feel like there are regional trends right now with areas where it's particularly difficult to get a job, whereas there are others where it's easier? Or do you think across the board that it's hit or miss, depending on the institution? We'll start out with Dr. Sokolov.
Well, I don't have real great data to back this up, but my sense is that it's a lot hit and miss. I think, in general, there's probably less availability across the board nationally, not regionally per se, but nationally, because of the pressures that we talked about a little bit earlier. But I think it really depends on what's happening with that particular institution. And, did they have a bunch of departures? Did they have a big expansion? Or have they taken on 2 new community hospitals that they now need to cover that weren't there yesterday? So it's like all job searching. Timing is kind of everything, or at least maybe not everything, but a big part of how that all gets structured as well. I mean, I think in California, there's variability. There's, some of our programs that are not hiring faculty right now, but are definitely keeping an eye open to see, what will change in the future. And there are others that do have some open needs right now. Maybe it's 1 position or 2 positions, or as Dr. Mills had mentioned, maybe it's a very specific position of what you're looking for, like a medical director or something like that. So I think overall, probably needs are down a little bit. People are just being more cautious, but there's definitely variability. I mean, when I looked at, again, I mentioned, and we'll reinforce it again at the end, this availability of some data about what places that are hiring or not. There are some zeros on that list. There are some 1s and some 2s, and there are some 6, 8s, and 10s. I mean, there are some places even more than 10 that are hiring for a lot of positions, and oftentimes those are institutions that have really taken on a new contract, taken on a new hospital, and are really having to ramp up and have the opportunity to ramp up. So anyway, hope that helps.
Yeah, but is everyone? I saw a lot of heads nodding. Is everybody kind of in agreement that it's just hit or miss?
Yeah, maybe if I could just add, I completely agree with Peter. I do think it depends on the individual site. What I would recommend to applicants is when you're thinking about your geography, I mean, certainly there are places that you definitely would love to be in, or maybe places you definitely don't want to be in. And I think this is even a probably best year to sit down and really think about a list of where you would be willing to go, and maybe put them in tiers, in the sense these would be my top areas or my top geographies. I'm happy to work in Brooklyn and Queens, but I don't want to work in this area, whatever, and if you're talking about New York City, or just thinking about what a commute might look like. Because I think this might be a good year to think about expanding options, or just seeing if there are opportunities available in maybe an area you might not have thought about, but would be reasonable or doable from a commute, et cetera. Now, I think, as David mentioned, you don't want to back out of something, right? So I think you really have to just look inside and think about really where would you be willing to go? How long would you be willing to commute? Are you willing to look in different states or different places around the country? But I would recommend that for candidates, especially if you're in an area that maybe doesn't have a lot of programs, or the ones that are there right now are not hiring. And like I said before, definitely apply, as everyone else has said.
So it sounds like to me two really key things as points of advice that we've highlighted are, how can you as an applicant really distinguish yourself from others? And Dr. Mills mentioned sort of, perhaps you can say, I want to do the night shift. I want to be a nocturnist for the group. There's usually an appetite for something like that. I think the other really key thing that I feel like I'm hearing from the group is being very flexible. This is the year of all years probably to come into the application process with a great deal of humility, I'm sure you all have, but also flexibility. That will certainly increase your odds for a successful job search, I think.
I would add one more to that, Ian, which is this might be a great year for you really to think out your future, right? So I think, if you come in as an undifferentiated into an academic program, that's going to be a struggle for me to move the chess pieces around, figure out how to keep you. If you come out telling me with sincerity that you have a plan and you want to change the future of emergency medicine, and here's how you want to do it, that's a lot more enticing to an academic chair who's looking for building and growing, and who's actually going to be, and that's the beauty of academia, is your academic chairs, all of the folks that are on this call, are invested in you. Our job is to make sure you get what you need to grow, nurture, and create a career around yourself. And so, we're investing in you. This isn't, private practice where you're coming in and you're, I'm not going to use the term that's so commonly used, but to make sure flow is good, and you get patients in and out, and you go home with your check, and that's the end of it. For us, we're investing in you, and we want you to grow because we succeed when you succeed. And that's really critically important. So, coming in, having time, sitting down with your mentors where you are in your residency program or your fellowship, or reaching out to other chairs or reaching out to other folks, and really developing a career plan, a vocation plan for your future. It doesn't mean you can't change it at the end of the day if it's not working out, or some other opportunity comes along and you decide to take a different direction. But thinking through it a lot better, so that if you do get that interview and you get into that interview, that you're really impressing that academia is where you want to go, and I think that would be very useful.
And I think what then would for you, Dr. Martin, because I know this is something that you have going on at your institution. So if you have the applicant, like Dr. Wright is saying, that says, I've got a plan, and really I've always wanted to be, that, the go-to research person in this area, but there just isn't a spot at your academic shop now, but you have a community affiliate site where you really do need someone. I think this is something that comes up more and more as we have these larger networks with kind of the hub and spoke system of the academic tertiary center. Do you think that it works well for folks that really want to be true academic docs to take those affiliated sort of community site jobs to kind of get their foot in the door, or that they should do something else to really stay like truly traditionally academic?
It's a great question. This is what I do all day now, it seems. I think it sort of depends on how the particular department has structured its affiliated sites and the folks who work there. And so, when we began this journey of expansion and taking over sites around the region, the thing that I actually probably spent the most brain energy on was, would these folks that I'd be hiring to go there or inheriting from other practices be staff physicians or faculty? And I really, really gave that a lot of thought. And I had seen some other departments at our institution do it as well. And where I landed on it, well, first I went 5 years out in the future. I said, what does success look like for me? And for me, the answer that I came up with was as much as humanly possible, that we're sort of this one big happy family where everybody brings some value to the department. It may be, if you're in a clinical community site, your value is exceptional clinical care to a lot of patients. And at the other end of the spectrum, it might be no clinical care, but bringing in NIH dollars to the department to support investigative research, and then everything in between. So I, as a chair, landed on, I was going to grow the faculty. I didn't want a two-class system within the department, as two different names would have. Some of the other departments in my institution actually went the other way, and it's been a more troubled integration of those community sites. The growth, and I talk about tremendous growth, but like many other institutions, it's not a symmetrical growth, meaning it's usually more on the community side than at the academic side. We're not building more university hospitals, but we are building more community-based hospitals or freestanding emergency departments or micro hospitals or taking over community practices. So when you think about the growth of a department, at least in our environment, it's mostly on the community side. So I think it's real cool. I tell my residents this, those who interview, I am so incredibly envious of the opportunity that they had. So when I finished training, and I think everybody on this line, all the panelists can relate to this, I had a very dichotomous decision to make. What was familiar to me was the academic environment at the University of Maryland. And if I wanted to do community, it required cutting the umbilical cord and going somewhere that I didn't know at all. And I think it's amazing now that we have these opportunities to offer young graduates to come within one academic unit, but have these hybrid opportunities. So this is a very long way of saying, I think if you're really committed, and I have people who are, from other institutions, and I think it's worthwhile to come in. And so maybe you're not at the mothership as much as you ultimately want to be, but maybe it's 30-70 and 70% of your clinical time is in the community. What I tell them is, this is our starting point. And what I'm committed to you as your chairman is, we're going to have this conversation at least once a year. And it's a combination of which part of your job do you like the most? What do we need in the department? So if I have someone who's all at the mothership who decides, he or she is retiring, that creates an opportunity. And then secondly, how have you performed? Like, what is the objective evidence around that? And so it's a dynamic process. And so if for me, it would be an easy choice if my choice were not getting in at all and taking a job that maybe is skewed toward the community practice, but I have the opportunity to grow in to what I want, I'd probably take that.
If I could add, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, please do.
Something onto that, which was excellent. Just, for those people, and I've seen some question in the chat about, do I take a job out in the community and will that prevent me coming back for, I think that concept of asking, is there something like a 70-30 or an 80-20 split or something so I could do a little bit of time at the academic site? And if not, even if it's just 100% in the community, ask, how can I be involved in the department? Can I teach? Can I, give a lecture to the residents? Can I be on a committee? Can I, whatever it is, find out what's going on in the department, and if it fits your interest, your passion, et cetera, how can I contribute that's outside of my excellent clinical care I'm going to do in the community, but also give back to the academics? I think that's another way of being involved and showing your value as a faculty member.
Yeah, that's awesome. I want to add on to that just a little bit too. And it sounds like Dr. Martin has a program there that works very well for him where they're all faculty. There's plenty of other examples, and I would just cite what worked for us well here at Wages is kind of having a faculty and then more of a community model. And then we have people that are working in the community who are also faculty. And so there are examples, I think, of both that work very well. And tying this all back together to that point of flexibility, just engaging in the conversation, understanding what's possible and understanding what's possible in the future. So even if you can't get into the academic shop to do your clinical work in year one, if there's a pathway to do that, that might be a great option to know that in the future that might be possible for you.
Let me just add into this one a little bit too. I think I agree with everything that our esteemed panelists have said so far around this. At our shop, we don't have any community hospitals affiliated with ours. We have multiple academic medical centers, but no community centers. So there's not the ability to do that 70-30 in the same way. But in that sort of circumstance, and I see that as Sarah and Brennan had a couple of questions around this also in the chat. As Angela, as Dr. Mills said, staying engaged with the academic department is really important, volunteering with the residency, doing mock orals, that sort of thing. Also per diem work. So for us, we don't have the 70-30 split, and we may have a hiring freeze for full-time faculty, But sometimes we'll still have some needs for someone to work a couple shifts a month. Maybe I don't have a full position, but I can get a couple shifts a month, and it's variable. If we can use you, we use you. If we don't, we don't. But that at least gives an opportunity to, if you're in the community and that's your main bread and butter, paying your living, it's a way to stay connected and to become a known entity. And with all hiring, just like when you were applying to residency, all things being equal, people tend to take known entities over unknown entities. So the more that people know you, that people understand what you're like as a physician and as a member of the department and of the community, and what you add and the way you show up, and all these sorts of things are really, really important. So I think, if you're in the community and you're not at the academic site but want to be connected with it, you have to be proactive and really reach out and say, hey, I'd love to give this talk I gave to the residents. I had this for my residency. It was really, my friends loved it. Could I give this talk, or could I help with a workshop on this or that? So I think that's important. And then someone also mentioned about, well, what about if you're, do something else for that year, like you do global health or you do something else? I don't think that's going to be held against you per se, but I just think it's important to stay connected. And I would also add, if you can, turn anything you're doing into some sort of scholarship, because scholarship is still, an important academic currency. So if you do something with global health, if there's a little project you do out of it, fantastic. Or if you write up something about your experience or something educational about it, fantastic. Or if you have a curriculum that you somehow disseminate while you're doing your global health work, fantastic. So think about not just doing things, but making those things into academic and scholarly product and projects that improve your academic career and also make you more competitive as applicants looking for faculty jobs.
Great, thank you. All those are, I think each of the angles taken were really valuable. We have, as several of you have mentioned, had several questions come on already. We'll kind of pivot now and focus from the content that we had already outlined ourselves to focusing on the rest of the time on the questions that come in through the chat. So feel free, everyone, to continue to ask more questions through the chat, and we'll monitor that. Going back to some of the questions, I think that where you left it, Dr. Sokolov, is transitions well for this. We'll say Dr. Wright. Dina asks, and I think this is a really good question, how can applicants demonstrate a willingness to be flexible for department needs without appearing aimless or insincere? And with that, I would just add, sometimes there's so many good opportunities that you take advantage of all the opportunities you can, and before you know it, your CV is full, but almost so well-rounded that you don't really have a niche. So how do you focus in a way that resonates with who's going to hire you, and really show that you're sincere?
Yeah, so the risk of the undifferentiated CV. I think this year you'll be giving a little bit more of a pass. I'm just going to be honest with you, and going out and seeking other opportunities and ways to make yourself different are probably going to be seen a little bit more positive light than maybe the concern by going in multiple directions. I think the best way for you to sort of corral that gets a little bit back to what I had said before, is have a plan. It's what you articulate, right? You can say, yeah, I did this, I did this, I did that. They were all in 3 different directions. They were interesting and they were opportunities, but here's what I really want to do. Being able to understand a little bit about the place that you're applying, what they need, what are they looking for? And, doing a little bit of homework before you get on the phone call it's always helpful. That's for any job, whether it be for academia or for anything else. I think the opportunities that, let me make this point. This is temporary. So what I want to do is just make sure that everybody who's on this call, who's really interested in academia and are like, crap, there's no jobs out there, to understand that this too will pass. It is temporary, and we will move out of this. And academia is not going anywhere. Emergency medicine is not going anywhere. In fact, I think that's the beauty of emergency medicine. It's one of the most robust fields that there is, and one of the most flexible and resilient fields, because people aren't going to stop having accidents, and they're not going to stop getting sick. We're going to be needed more than ever. So there is a bright light at the end of the tunnel, and it's not the train. So I think keep your head up. Look for those opportunities for you to grow, and it may be, as Dr. Martin or Dr. Mills or Dr. Miller said, in their programs, where there's a community opportunity, maybe not in the big shop or in the academic side or the faculty side, and you may want to take that so that and you can express that to them. Look, I'm going to take this, but I'm going to be working in academia in your shop soon. So, I mean, that's fine. We want to see that. We want to see people have energy, people have engagement. The rules of life are show up and participate. that's really, that really will get you through more than 75% of people in the world. I'll stop there before I start my quotes. My kids roll their eyes when I start doing all my quotes.
I just want to add on to the show up and get involved, that even if you find yourself not in the academic job that you want, make something of it. Make sure you get something on your CV from it. Get engaged, get involved, make the place better that you're working, even if it's not exactly where you want to be. It'll help you.
Yeah, I just feel like I have to add to that one too. Oh, go ahead, Angela. Please.
Sorry. I was just going to say, the other thing to add to Dina's question is that, you might apply somewhere, and if they're really looking for an ultrasound trained faculty and that's not you, it's just not going to happen. Don't take it personally. But if you do have the opportunity, and say your goals as you lay it out, I really want to be in education, I want to be a program director, I'm committed to, graduate medical education. But if you're authentic about it and you say, but listen, I understand the opportunity might not be here. I really value education. I'd be happy to teach at other levels, UME, whatever it is, or where you need me type of thing. So I think it's okay and doesn't come across as aimless if you have a plan and you explain that I understand that's not available right now, and I understand there's a lot of value in learning and doing different roles and different jobs. I think that's also an important thing to think about.
And then Mohammed asks, I think another good question that we sort of touched on, but Dr. Sokolov, I'll direct this one at you. Are there specific things that you look at in an applicant's CV who's fresh out of residency applying for an academic faculty position?
Okay, so I will be very straightforward about this, because it does not help to not hear things that are not very straightforward and honest. So at our program, it would be extremely rare to hire a faculty member straight out of residency without fellowship training onto our faculty. That's partly because we don't have community sites, for example, so there's no position like that available. Our faculty that come on are all at our major academic teaching facilities. I won't say that it never happens, but it honestly rarely happens. That's different. That's one place. There are absolutely places out there where you can come straight out of residency and have faculty positions and build from that and grow from that and have fabulous careers. So I don't, even though it sounds like discouraging news, I don't want it to sound like discouraging news. I do think, and I just want to be honest with this, I do think that in general, fellowship training is a really valuable thing if you're going to pursue an academic career. It does a number of things. One is it does give you an area of expertise and focus. And the reality is, in the academic world, having some degree of niche and focus tends to lead to success. It makes your life easier. So it's not just about getting that job, but it's actually being more successful within that job. Fellowships also give you a great opportunity to develop your scholarship and to make other, frankly, do networking, make other mentors, develop a wonderful group of mentors, through your fellowship as well. All of those things are really aligned with, again, not just getting an academic job, but being successful within that academic job, finding it easier to get your promotions, finding it easier to produce scholarship and do the things that you need for promotion. Not every academic job needs a fellowship. There are different jobs that do not, but in general, I honestly think they're wonderful things to do. They help you in lots of different ways. No one wants to hear that after doing 3 or 4 years of a residency, to think that there's something else I might have to do or whatever. But, you know, the other thing is, you know, I don't know, I hate to say it, but you start getting old like me and you look back and you say, you know, it's a great opportunity. Like, it's, you know, it's hard because you're so ready to get out there and start doing your thing. But there's only once that you finish your residency and have an opportunity to do this. It's really hard to go back and do a fellowship. I mean, when you're out making a, you know, non-resident salary, when you're making a, you know, community or academic full salary, it's really hard to say, I'm going to go back and go take a year or two and now do a fellowship and reduce my salary and that sort of stuff when you got expenses and family and, you know, all the sort of things going on. So it is a great opportunity. And honestly, in some ways, the fact that the job market for faculty is a little tighter this year just means that it's a great opportunity to explore fellowship and to do one, and you know, make some lemonade out of the lemons in that respect, because it actually can, again, really have you have a more satisfying and successful long-term career. So there you go.
And what about just a follow-up question on that? What if someone wants to do something maybe for the next 1-2 years, not a fellowship? What if they find, you know, some job that they can work maybe part-time, and then they decide to pursue an MBA or an MHA or an MPH? Do you think that that's another approach that reflects well on them, or is that something that really you think that that the maximum benefit would come from a fellowship that's going to kind of give you extra training in one area?
Well, I mean, I'll tell you, from my perspective, I think it really depends. You know, it depends what your career goals and what you want to do and what you're trying to accomplish in your career. Obviously, if you want to be a toxicologist, there's really kind of only one way to do that one, right? You need to do a medical toxicology fellowship. But I think, you know, any sort of advanced degree training will always provide you with additional skills you can bring. You know, and again, I've hired people. I hired someone straight out of residency, but they had a PhD before they went to medical school, and they had, you know, tremendous additional skills. So sometimes the sequencing isn't exactly what it is, but I think getting additional training, if it makes sense for what you want to do in your career and it gives you more skills, makes sense. I mean, in residency, let's face it, people are busy. I mean, you're trying to learn clinical medicine. You're trying to figure out how to go from a, you know, graduated fourth-year medical student to an independent practitioner of a very complex clinical specialty, right? So a lot of our time is focused on our clinical education and learning how to be great doctors, great physicians. And, you know, if you want to be a researcher, you know, even if you do a research project while you're a resident, the reality is it's just not the same as having done dedicated training in research. I mean, it's a different skill set, just like intubating. You know, it's, if you don't learn how to practice intubating, you're not going to be able to intubate people. And it's the same thing with a lot of things in academia. You know, having that additional specialized training just will make you more successful in doing it. So yes, for some, you know, doing an MPH, doing a, you know, MBA, depending on what your goals are. If it's an administrative path, that might make some sense as well. But it doesn't have to necessarily be a fellowship per se. But those are kind of already packaged, put together for you, thoughtful, established programs that are also housed within academic departments of emergency medicine. And everybody uses fellowships as the kind of breeding ground for their faculty. It's a great way that, you know, if you have a fellow that's been terrific with you and they meet the need of what you want, it's a pretty natural thing to want to keep that person in your department.
No, I was going to say, you know, I think you made some excellent points, Peter. And you know, my ideal, so I think a lot of the trends we've talked about around COVID will be reversed or are already reversing. But I do think the trend line around the competitive nature of getting academic jobs for those who haven't done fellowship or have prior faculty experience will continue. I think it's going to get harder and harder and harder. And actually, and I know you guys might not want to hear this, but I think that's actually a good thing. It speaks to the maturation of our discipline, that it's getting so competitive, and we have that critical mass of people that we're having to raise the bar in terms of the kinds of people we then want to teach our future emergency physicians. So for me, my ideal actually is to attract amazing residents who want to stay in my amazing fellowships. And that's when I really get to know their talents and they really start to subspecialize, and then they become faculty. That is just the best win-win situation, both for that resident who can really plant roots now over the next 4 to 5 years, leading up to, I won't say guarantee, but a much more likely faculty position by way of having invested that 3 years of residency and that 1 or 2 years of fellowship program. So, let me ask this, Andrew. So I assume we're not just talking to folks who are applying now. We're talking to residents who are at all different stages. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that we have a good mix.
Okay. So I think to those who aren't like in the heat of battle of this year, first of all, that's probably plays to your benefit. Some of this will get sorted out before you're looking to apply. But if you're committed to academics, and I think particularly if you're in a shorter, the 3-year program, it's just important to start cultivating that application almost from day one. Get involved in your department, make it known what your career interests are, because that will probably be music, quite honestly, to the chair's ears and to your program director's ears, and will actively work to cultivate you, maybe not for a position in 2 or 3 years later in that shop, but perhaps in some other shop.
Great, thank you to everyone that answered. We have a couple of questions left, but I think we really have touched on the core of what these other questions are asking, and we are running low on time. Just thank you everyone for participating. And I think just to summarize, it seems like my impression, my walk away thought from this is that while there are sort of new challenges with the job market and things continue to get more competitive, we as emergency medicine providers just need to continue to do what we do well, which is to be creative, to make a good plan, to be flexible with it, to get good feedback, and it's going to work out for us. Any other final thoughts from the panel as we wrap up?
I would just share the optimism that that our panel started with, that this is such an amazing opportunity to work in academics, and I commend you for contemplating whether that's in your future. And we really do need the best in academic emergency medicine. So thank you for that.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much for participating. Just our final slide here, you'll see that RAMS and SAM have a variety of resources and ways to get involved. You can find links to these resources on our webinar website at sam.org/the inside scoop on academic jobs. Be sure to ask your program director. Again, just remember about the inside scoop from the AACEM faculty hiring data list. That's a resource that they should have access to. And thank you again for our panelists tonight for their insights into finding academic emergency medicine jobs during this unusual time, for their contributions to our field and for their examples. And to our audience, thank you for joining us tonight as well. We hope to see you on more of our upcoming RAMS webinars. Stay safe and have a good night.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, and stay safe.